Hello, everyone. Thank you, Richard, for a very glowing introduction. I've just dropped the text in the chat, if that's easier for you to look up. Well, I'll just be reflecting a few thoughts on the first three verses of this passage. As Richard noted, some of you may know that though I was born in America, I spent most of my life in Canada. And so a return to America has offered somewhat of an outsider's view into our nation. Now, I don't think this will come as a surprise to you, but I've noticed that we Americans really love to celebrate wins. We love to boast about our successes. And as far as I can tell, even though Mennonites in America are not particularly bombastic in our style and dispositions, I think some of us can certainly be bombastic about our favorite sports teams, especially when they win. Is that right? You can throw a thumbs up on the screen. You know, America is for winners, or at least that's what we've been told to believe. We want to be seen as successful or blessed, if you want to use Christian lingo. Yes. But there's a corollary to winning, and is that often someone has to lose. And as the past year has highlighted, there continues to be a narrative of someone winning at the expense of those that lose, whether it's about an election or a virus or vaccinations or immigration or the tragic disease of racism. And on this last point, I find it a privilege to serve alongside other members of the Racial Justice Task Force, commissioned by the Virginia Mennonite Conference, to truthfully look at the ways that the conference has upheld racism or discrimination in our history and in our institutions. As we have been talking, we've been asking, in what ways have we as a conference won at the silent expense of those that lose? Now, a significant part of that work is to of the work in the conference is to say, silence no more. Silence no more. You know, within the VMC, each time we gather together for an assembly like this today, we often take time to acknowledge wins and losses as a conference. We can celebrate the birth of new congregations as a win, but we can also acknowledge the loss of congregations. It's the reality of life as a diverse community of congregations that we feel deeply both the wins and the losses. And as Americans, the losses often seem to sting a little bit harder, or perhaps that's shared by all humans. We don't have to be afraid of either of these, though, despite our tendency to gloss over our losses. Now, I know that when I come to texts like Isaiah 61, I'm inclined to identify with the wins. I identify with the wins of the Lord's favor and of the win of being sent as a proclaimer of good news and of freedom and of comfort. I want to be the one who gets to tell others of God's favor upon them. I want to be the one who bestows beauty and joy upon those who are disturbed and distraught. You know, in wanting to identify with the winning in this passage, I wonder if that is perhaps more of an American instinct rather than a particularly Christian one. And isn't it quite presumptuous and perhaps just as American of us to read ourselves into a text that clearly points to a specific anointed one? I wonder, what might it look like for us to hear and embrace these words of Isaiah as the apparent losers? What if we were the poor? What if we were the brokenhearted? What if we were the captive and the prisoners? What if we were the ones who mourn and grieve and the ones who sit in ashes? Does that perhaps change how you hear and read these words? You know, at worst, our American ethos defiantly denies the possibility that we might actually be considered losers. And at best, our American ethos longs so badly to be lifted from those ashes as quickly as possible. But the words of Isaiah offer us incredible hope. The living God offers hope, not just beyond the loss, but in the midst of the loss. You see, when we understand just who it is that the Spirit has come upon and who it is that has been anointed to proclaim the good news, we find that the losses and the ashes and the mourning, they don't have to scare us. They don't have to overwhelm us because they don't define us. So we can name our losses honestly, and we can feel them for what they are. We can take our disturbed and distraught emotions and call them for what they are. And we might even come to a place to be okay, to being called losers in the eyes of those around us. It's because of who the Spirit of God has first been poured out upon that we can name these losses and lament, but we do it with hope. Isaiah's words point to the one to come, who, though was a winner in all respects, yet loses not only in the eyes of those who condemn him, but he loses in the eyes of those who worshiped and followed him and lifted him up. And the one who should be a winner in all respects because he is indeed God, we find loses by hanging on the ugliest and most brutal form of suffering known at the time, on a Roman cross. We've come to know this winner who becomes a loser as Jesus, the Son of the living God. Yet even in the midst of his apparent losing, we can observe something incredible. As Jesus hangs on the cross, with the very last threads of life dwindling from him, he still fulfills the words of Isaiah. On the cross, he has the wherewithal to see the mourning and the anxiety of his mother, Mary, at his feet. You see, she's not just mourning the loss of her precious son. She's anxious about what's going to happen next when he's gone. How will she even survive on her own? Yet Jesus offers comfort to her by ensuring she will be taken care of, even as he apparently loses. Of course, we all know that the cross is not the end of the story. On the cross, Jesus does ultimately win, but in an unexpected way by conquering the power of sin and its curse, death. Jesus not only atones for our sin, but resurrects from the grave. Jesus wins by showing us a new future for humanity and for all of creation. Today, as a conference, we indeed acknowledge our wins and our losses. But we don't do this alone. We stand on privileged ground compared to Isaiah, because we stand on this side of the cross in history. Someone has been anointed by the Spirit of God. Someone has been sent to us by the sovereign God of all creation. His name is Jesus, and he stands at the center of it all. All of our wins and all of our losses. So, be comforted. The losses don't define us, but neither do the wins. The ashes that we might sit in are not meant to be our state forever. Instead, in Christ, we have a sure and certain hope in the new heavens and earth to come. In Christ, beauty surely will rise. May it be so.